So a couple of Wednesdays ago, I was doing my very favorite Wednesday thing, singing with kids. Because it's October, we sang our autumn song. It's a pretty little piece that celebrates the golden leaves, migrating birds, and abundant harvests of autumn. And then also because it's October, we started learning a Christmas song, which we must practice now in order to know it well by December. As we were transitioning from the autumn song to the Christmas song, a 9-year-old boy said with real concern, "Everyone always forgets about Thanksgiving." And I realized he's kind of right. Walk into any big box store right now and you will still find plenty of Halloween stuff, but it's starting to happen, isn't it? And pretty soon all the Halloween stuff will be gone and the Christmas stuff will take it all over. For a brief moment, you can find a few leaf-themed placemats and that kind of thing, but you're going to have to look behind the giant snowmen and reindeer, and the music on the sound system will be nothing but holly jolly, right? It doesn't pay, you see, to get you to think about gratitude for all you do have. The market is driven by reminding you of all you want. In the marketplace, it kind of does seem like everyone always forgets about Thanksgiving, both capital T Thanksgiving and lowercase t Thanksgiving. Our bodies and brains accept this without much question because the way we are wired, we do tend to focus on the exciting moments of life, both terrible and wonderful. Our attention is mostly divided between the things that terrify us and the things that delight us. We are programmed, you see, to keep one eye peeled for danger wherever it might be lurking, and another eye on the lookout for the good things that satisfy our creaturely appetites. Quiet contemplation of gratitude is risky from a survivalist point of view. When we get into fight or flight mode, Thanksgiving might be one of the first things to go. Whenever we feel threatened or anxious, it's biologically normal for us to become hyper-focused on the source of distress. And while it is necessary for us to be realistic about any situation, it is unhealthy to obsess about our problems. We are seeing this large scale in the mental health crisis that has come to define this particular moment that we inhabit. Now, people can be forgiven for feeling anxious. The problems we are facing are real, and it's very easy to fall into a mindset of perpetual worry and even scarcity, telling ourselves that we'll never have enough of what is needed to solve the problems, right? Never enough social workers or affordable housing, stable families, sane politicians, clean energy, on and on. And yet dwelling in such thoughts only makes us prisoners to a fatalistic way of thinking. There is much more to be gained from a different kind of thinking. And we can learn it from someone who knew firsthand what it felt like to be in the middle of an absolutely impossible situation. His name was Paul, and he was in prison. And a first-century Roman prison was a bleak ordeal indeed, and Paul knew he would be there until he was executed. His teachings had offended the religious and civic leaders of his time, and men in power were terrified of what would happen if too many people organized themselves into communities that lifted people out of poverty and despair, because, it's easier to control people if they have no hope of anything better. Paul's message of hope was spreading too far, and the empire was striking back against him and against the various communities he had formed, made of people dedicated to following the teachings of a certain carpenter from Nazareth who had also been put to death a few decades prior. People knew it was dangerous to follow Jesus, to live out his teachings of generosity and abundance, which diminished the power of the empire, who kept people in line using the weapons of fear and scarcity. If they could not control the mind, they would destroy the body. And that was the constant threat looming over the followers of Jesus. But even from such a dark place, a Roman prison cell, and impending execution, Paul was able to write a letter of encouragement to the community of Jesus followers in the town of Philippi. They were not without their problems. Like all early Christians, they were targets of Roman persecution, and like all churches, they even had their struggles with interpersonal dynamics, disagreements over which of their leaders had the right idea on various topics of controversy. But rather than ignoring their challenges, Paul spoke directly into the situation, urging two of the church's main leaders, women named Euodia and Syntyche, to be of the same mind in the Lord. And he asked someone else to help them out so that all of them could continue to focus not on the disagreements, but on their shared purpose of building a community of Jesus' followers. Having addressed the source of the stress and anxiety, Paul then provided the antidote with the final words of his letter. To the entire congregation in Philippi, he wrote, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say, rejoice." Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. This makes for very cheerful church music, but in times of real stress and anxiety, Paul almost sounds a little bit like Pollyanna, until we remember he is writing this letter from prison. This is not just a cheery gloss on a bad day, take a spoonful of sugar and make the medicine go down. This is a condemned man who still manages to find some memory of joy, to rejoice, not in the grimness of the situation, but in the Lord. Even on the darkest night of his soul, Paul can remember all of God's goodness and provision, all the many times he has experienced love and grace, and that's the memory that brings him true joy. It will not get him out of jail or save him from the executioner's blade, but rather than lamenting his imminent death, Paul chooses to remember the many gifts of his life. His joy comes from his gratitude, which is the best antidote for fear and despair. This is Paul's advice to the congregation in Philippi. They should remember what God has done for them and find joy in that. It's so important that Paul says it twice, rejoice in the Lord. Again, I will say rejoice. Paul knew things were not easy. People were worried for him and for themselves, but the harder things got, the more time they needed to spend cultivating a mindset of gratitude. If they didn't, then their worries would consume them. And if they were consumed by worry, how could they be their best selves? How could anyone embody the love and light of Christ if they were inwardly dwelling in darkness? Paul knew that if they could focus on their joys, the tightness in their hearts would soften and they could live into his next piece of advice, which was, let your gentleness be known to everyone. Because if gratitude is the first step in curing anxiety, the second step is to attend to the needs of others. Yeah, it was a stressful time, but it was a stressful time for everyone. And recognizing that they could be of service to others, people could shift their focus from their own anxiety to someone else's situation, and there is healing power in helping someone else. Paul knew back then what behavioral psychologists and medical researchers are confirming now. Our very own Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, claims that some of the most powerful antidotes to anxiety and suffering come from being connected to others and in being in service. You want to feel better? Help someone else who is hurting. Like Paul said, let your gentleness be known to everyone. Paul's advice continued with a reminder that his friends in Philippi were not alone. He wrote to them, the Lord is near. Do not worry about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Notably, Paul does not mention the guarding of the body. He knew the probable outcome of his situation, and he did not expect a miraculous intervention, but he did understand that prayer brings peace to the heart and mind. So to a worried congregation, he recommended a prayer practice with thanksgiving. Yes, they would let their requests be made known to God, but their supplications would be balanced by their prayers of gratitude, as they remembered what God was already doing in their midst, recognizing that even in the tough times, the Lord is near. Whenever people felt worry creeping into the edges of their minds, they had something more powerful than worry. They had the nearness of God and the ability to be in conversation with God. What a gift that must have been for Paul, too, in the middle of the night in his lonely prison cell, to feel that God was as close as his next breath as he prayed. I imagine Paul practicing sort of a breath prayer, exhaling the worry and the negative self-talk, inhaling the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding. Bigger than his fear of dying was his assurance that he was beloved to God, who was near. It's fine and well to speak of these things now, isn't it, when we are probably feeling about as much hope as is available to us? But we know how it is at around 2 in the morning, when our minds take advantage of our inactivity and try to engage us in the worry game. I'm sure Paul felt that way and then some alone in a prison cell. But he also knew the kind of thoughts that would overpower the negative thoughts, and this is how he counseled his friends. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Whenever we lean toward catastrophizing, that is excellent counsel. If there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, but of course there is, there always is, because remember, God is near and God is worthy of praise. And we do not need to look too terribly far to find something that is true, honorable, or just. We can always think of something pure and pleasing and commendable. Paul's advice is to count the many blessings of life, tally them right up, and then focus on those things. Imagine what it might be like at 2 in the morning to spend some time giving thanks for all that is good in the world, all that is worthy of praise, even simply giving thanks to God for being God. Ultimately, Paul knew that his time was drawing near, and the final gift he gave to his beloved friends in Philippi was this piece of advice. Keep on doing the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you. This teaching is essential. When people are in crisis, they often exhibit one of the 4 trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. All of these responses are normal as immediate reactions to stress, but getting stuck in any of those places will not keep us on the path of Christ, which requires courage, commitment, connection, and community. Paul implored his community to keep their connection and their commitment, to courageously follow the path he had shown them, rather than fleeing or freezing up from fear. We too can follow Paul's advice whenever we find ourselves in a state of worry. Remembering the examples of people who have exemplified the behavior consistent with our faith and modeling our lives after theirs will keep us committed to the path of Christ as we continue serving those Christ has called us to serve with gratitude for the ability to do so. It is there in our gratitude and our service that the God of peace will be with us, giving us comfort even as we comfort others. I did not say any of this to the young boy who told me, "Oh, everyone always forgets about Thanksgiving." What I did tell him was this: while it is true that we do make a big deal about Halloween and an even bigger deal about Christmas, Thanksgiving can be part of our daily lives. And I reminded my young friend of the very first song we had sung that day, the song we sing every Wednesday within minutes of entering the church. We all sit down at the snack table, and before we eat, we sing a blessing. It is a song of thanksgiving because every day of every season is a time to be grateful and rejoice in what God has done and is still doing in our lives. I would like to sing you that song now as a blessing. May it help us all to think of what God has done and still wishes to do in us and through us. The world is far from perfect and the work is far from complete, but may this blessing inspire us to stay committed to bringing about God's will here on earth. For all the blessings of the year, for all the friends we hold so dear, for peace on earth both far and near, we thank thee, Lord. I'm grateful to all of you whose lives are committed to blessing others, to letting your gentleness be known to others, to working for peace both far and near. May the peace of God be with you.